Birthday candles. Every cake gets covered in spit and wax before anyone takes a bite. Ancient Greeks started this tradition, but it wasn't for birthdays. The Greeks made honey cakes for Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and stuck candles on top to make them glow like the moon. When the candles burned out, they believed the rising smoke carried prayers straight up to the gods. Somewhere along the way, someone decided this ritual belonged at birthday parties instead of temples. Now you gather around a cake. The birthday person makes a wish and blows out the flames in one breath. Everyone watches as respiratory droplets spread across the frosting. Then you all eat it. We know it's disgusting. We do it anyway. The Greeks wanted divine favor. You're settling for saliva-glazed cake. Saying bless you. A sneeze sprays germs everywhere, and your automatic response is to say a religious prayer. The reason traces back to a plague that killed millions. During the plague of Justinian in 590 AD, Pope Gregory I noticed that sneezing was one of the earliest symptoms before people died. Saying God bless you became a literal plea for survival, asking God to spare the sneezer from certain death. Eventually, that response became automatic, and centuries later, someone sneezes in a grocery store and you still mutter the same prayer without thinking. It doesn't matter if you're religious or if they're a stranger. The plague is gone, but the ritual remains. Shushing. Romans silenced people by putting a finger to their lips and making a hissing sound. That gesture survived 2,000 years, but nobody knew why it actually worked until recently. The sh sound appears across unrelated languages and cultures because it mimics something biological. Blood rushing through a mother's vessels during pregnancy creates constant white noise that sounds almost identical to shushing. Babies spend 9 months hearing that whooshing sound at around 85 to 95 decibels, louder than a vacuum cleaner. When they hear it again after birth, their brain recognizes it as the sound of safety and triggers an instant calming reflex. Romans didn't know about prenatal acoustics, but they figured out the sound worked anyway. The gesture of pressing a finger to the lips made the sh louder and directed it at the target. Now we shush crying babies, loud strangers, and people who talk during movies. It may be annoying when someone does it to you, but it beats being told to shut the heck up. Covering your mouth when you yawn. Your hand flies up to cover your mouth the second a yawn starts. Medieval people did the same thing, but for a reason that had nothing to do with being polite. Medieval belief held that your soul could escape through your mouth when it opened wide during a yawn. Worse, evil spirits or demons could crawl inside through the gaping hole and possess you. People made the sign of the cross over their mouths or covered them with their hands to seal the opening. During the Black Plague, many doctors believed that yawning was fatal and that covering your mouth was essential protection. The fear of demons eventually faded, but the gesture didn't. Today, you're still covering your mouth to protect an escape route your soul doesn't actually use and calling it manners. Clapping. Buying fake followers didn't start with TikTok. Romans were paying for applause 2,000 years ago. The gesture itself comes from primates. Apes slapped their bodies when excited or threatening rivals, and early humans discovered that clapping hands together produced the loudest, sharpest percussion the body can make without tools. Ancient Greeks formalized it in the 6th century BC as a way for theater crowds to signal mass approval, but Romans saw an opportunity. Theater performances were competitive, and the loudest applause determined which acts got booked and which playwrights got paid. So wealthy performers started hiring professionals, called clackers, to pack the audience and clap on cue. The goal wasn't just to show support, it was to drown out competing acts with sheer volume and manufacture the illusion that the crowd loved you. Performers without money for hired clappers lost work regardless of talent, because perception became reality. Eventually, the pay-for-applause system collapsed, but everyone kept slapping their hands together anyway. Booing. Did you know you're actually making cattle sounds at people who disappoint you? The exact origin of the word boo is still debated by etymologists, but one theory suggests it started in the early 1800s as an imitation of the sound oxen or cows make. Basically the same noise as moo, used mockingly to compare someone to livestock. What we do know for certain is that the low, sustained sound travels farther than shouting, and when thousands of people do it in unison, that low frequency becomes something performers can physically feel in their chests. The behavior itself comes from ancient Greece, where theater audiences would hiss, boo, and kick their heels against seats to punish bad performances, which at the time was considered a civic duty to hold performers accountable. Whether or not the word actually comes from cattle sounds, Centuries later, we still manage to turn entire stadiums into one collective insult when athletes mess up or politicians say something we don't like. Saying cheese. Before the 1940s, photographers told people to say something completely different. The word changed because someone realized dairy was better at controlling faces. Early portrait subjects were actually told to say the word prunes to keep their mouth small and their expression serious. Victorian photography required long exposure times, and holding a smile that long looked unnatural or showed too much tooth. Serious faces photographed better. Then, in the 1940s, a Texas photographer discovered that saying cheese forced the mouth into a grin, because the E sound physically stretches your lips into a smile position. The word became standard because it worked mechanically, not because it made sense. Today we grin on command because someone named a dairy product, which is perfectly fitting because cheese actually does make people happy. Thumbs up. Romans used thumb signals to decide if gladiators lived or died. Modern culture got the signals backwards. In the arena, a thumbs-up gesture likely meant kill him because it represented an unsheathed sword pointing upward, ready to strike. Hiding the thumb inside a closed fist signaled mercy and symbolized a sheathed weapon. Historians believe the meanings reversed somewhere along the way, probably through mistranslation or artistic interpretation in paintings and films. Now, you give a thumbs-up sign to say good job, or click a thumbs-up symbol on social media, using a death sentence signal to show you like someone's photo of their food. The middle finger. Ancient Greeks had a medical term for this finger. It explained exactly what the gesture was supposed to represent. They called it the digitus imputicus, which translates to the shameless finger, or indecent finger. The gesture was a deliberate phallic symbol. The raised middle finger represented male anatomy, and the two surrounding folded fingers represented the two parts that come with it. The visual was intentional and unmistakable. It was designed to sexually degrade and dehumanize whoever it was aimed at. The Greeks used it as an insult in the same way people use it now. One finger, same message 2,000 years later. Societies that developed independently came up with different insults, but this one survived because the visual metaphor needs no translation. Shaking hands. Meeting someone new means grabbing their hand and pumping it up and down while staring into their eyes. This is considered normal. This custom actually started as a weapons check. Extending your right hand, the one most people use to hold a sword or dagger, showed you weren't armed. The vigorous shaking motion was meant to dislodge any hidden blade tucked up your sleeve. Medieval encounters required proof of peaceful intent before any conversation could begin, and the handshake provided that proof. Centuries later, job interviews and business meetings still use the same ritual. You grab a stranger's hand, pump it several times, and make direct eye contact to signal trustworthiness. While in reality, every handshake is a tiny pantomime of proving you're not about to stab someone. Waving hello. Flapping an empty hand at someone you see has been the universal hello for centuries. Just like the handshake, it started as proof you weren't holding a weapon. Raising your hand with an open palm facing outward showed you weren't gripping a rock, blade, or any other object that could be thrown or used to attack. It was a long-distance signal that meant, I'm unarmed. The motion worked when people were too far apart to shake hands, but still needed to communicate peaceful intentions. Waving became the default greeting and farewell because it served a survival function first. Now you wave at people pulling out of driveways or leaving parties, still showing an empty palm for reasons you've never questioned. Yet another weapons check disguised as friendliness. Cheers. Medieval banquets had a poison problem, so guests started clinking drinks together hard enough to spill liquid between cups. If they drank, it meant yours was safe. Poisoning someone's wine was a popular medieval assassination method, and banquet hosts needed a way to prove the drinks were safe. The solution was clinking glasses with enough force to slosh liquid from one cup into another. If your host drank after the exchange, you knew their cup wasn't poisoned, because nobody poisons their own drink. The toast became a mandatory ritual before anyone could take the first sip. Modern parties kept the tradition, but dropped the paranoia. Today we tap glasses, say cheers, salud, kanpai, or skol, and drink, performing a mutual poison test at every celebration without realizing that's what it is. Tipping. The Pullman Company found a loophole after the Civil War. Instead of paying wages to formerly enslaved workers, they made customers do it. After emancipation, employers wanted to avoid paying fair wages to black workers. The Pullman Company and similar businesses imported the European veils custom, where customers gave small gifts to servants, and turned it into a wage replacement system. Workers were forced to rely entirely on tips instead of receiving an actual salary from their employer. It allowed companies to continue exploiting freed slaves without technically violating the law. The system spread across the service industry and became standard American practice. Now, you pay for a meal, then pay extra to the server, even though you already paid for the service. The custom has explicitly racist roots, designed to avoid paying fair wages. Kissing as a greeting. Romans pressed their lips to female relatives' faces every time they saw them. They weren't just being affectionate. The practice started as a taste test. Roman men would kiss their wives, daughters, and other female relatives on the mouth or cheek to check if they'd been drinking the family's wine. It was a literal breathalyzer that detected alcohol on their breath. Wine theft was a concern in households where wine was valuable and stored in quantity, and kissing provided a discreet way to monitor consumption. The custom eventually became a standard greeting that signaled familial closeness, long after anyone cared about someone stealing their alcohol. What started as a Roman sobriety check turned into a way to say hello. Wearing neckties. Men wrap decorative fabric around their necks for formal occasions. It started with soldiers in battle. 17th century Croatian mercenaries wore scarves called cravats around their necks to hold their collars together during combat. King Louis VIII of France saw them and decided the look was stylish, so he adopted it for his royal court. The cravat became a symbol of class and sophistication, and the style evolved into the modern necktie. What was functional battlefield gear turned into required formal wear. Now you tighten a strip of silk around your throat before job interviews and weddings because a French king thought soldiers looked good. White dresses at weddings. Brides wear white dresses that stain easily and cost thousands of dollars. Queen Victoria started the trend for a reason that had nothing to do with purity. Before 1840, brides wore their best dress in whatever color they owned. Queen Victoria wore white to her wedding, not as a symbol of virginity, but as a flex. White fabric showed that she was wealthy enough to afford a dress that would be ruined by the slightest dirt or stain. It was a single-use luxury garment, a visible demonstration of disposable wealth. The statement worked. Brides across Europe and America copied her, and white became the default. The purity symbolism came later as a convenient reinterpretation. The white wedding dress is actually a 180-year-old wealth signal that people retrofitted with moral meaning. Black clothing at funerals. Everyone wears dark colors to funerals. The tradition started because people were afraid of what might follow them home. Wearing black was a disguise meant to hide mourners from the ghost of the deceased. The belief was that the dead person's spirit lingered near their body and might not recognize you in dark, concealing clothing. If the ghost couldn't identify you, it wouldn't follow you home or haunt you afterward. Mourning clothes were essentially camouflage from ghosts. The tradition stuck long after the belief in vengeful spirits faded, and black became the standard color of grief. Today, we wear dark colors to funerals for reasons that have nothing to do with hiding. We're still following the camouflage rules without knowing that's what they are. Throwing rice at weddings. Guests pelt newlyweds with handfuls of uncooked rice as they exit the ceremony. Romans invented the custom with a specific goal in mind. It was a fertility ritual. Romans threw wheat or grain at couples because it symbolized abundance and reproduction. The act wasn't celebratory, it was directive. Throwing grain at the newlyweds was a way to tell them, or force them, to have many children. They were pelting them with reproductive expectations disguised as a blessing. The tradition survived for centuries and crossed cultures, eventually replacing wheat with rice in many places. The original intent changed into generic good wishes, but the mechanics stayed the same. Wedding guests still throw food at couples to encourage fertility, whether anyone admits that's what they're doing or not.
Throwing coins in fountains.
People toss money into water and make wishes. Ancient cultures did it because they believed something lived there. Ancient people believed that gods and spirits inhabited water sources, especially springs and wells that provided drinking water. Throwing a coin into the water was payment to the deity in exchange for clean water, healing, or a granted wish. You were essentially buying divine intervention with the smallest currency you had. The transaction became ritual, and the ritual became tradition. Centuries later, fountains replaced sacred springs, but the behavior didn't change. You still toss coins into water and hope for something in return, performing an economic exchange with gods you don't believe in anymore. Knocking on wood. Say something hopeful and you immediately look for wood to knock on. The reason goes back thousands of years to Celtic tribes across Europe. Ancient people didn't just think spirits lived in water. Celtic tribes believed spirits and gods lived inside trees too. Knocking on wood served two purposes. It either called on those spirits for help and protection, or it distracted them so they wouldn't overhear you bragging and ruin your good fortune out of spite. The spirits were temperamental. Announcing your luck too loudly risked angering them, so you knocked to either wake them up or cover your tracks depending on which version of the belief you followed. Historians still debate whether the tradition actually came from the Celts or a children's game of tag where touching wood made you safe that was first recorded in 1805. Either way, now you say something optimistic and your hand finds the nearest wooden surface to knock on before your good luck disappears. Crossing fingers. Today, twisting two fingers together is supposed to bring luck, but early Christians did it for an entirely different reason. When Christianity was illegal in the Roman Empire, believers used crossed fingers as a covert signal to identify each other. People would cross their index and pointer fingers together as a symbol of the cross, signaling their faith without speaking. Later, individuals started crossing their own fingers as a solo gesture, forming the symbol alone as a request for God's protection. Getting caught practicing Christianity meant execution, so the sign had to be subtle. The gesture survived long after the danger passed and eventually became a general good luck symbol disconnected from its original religious meaning. Now you cross your fingers when hoping for something, using a survival signal from an underground religion that had to hide it or face death. You've been doing weird things your entire life without questioning them. You'll probably keep doing all of them anyway, but at least now you'll know why.